Hello, welcome to English for Everyone, where we practice real-life American English. Today we're going to learn some great expressions, so let's get started. Today we're learning these expressions. At point-blank range, or just point-blank. What's the difference? And what do they mean? Let's take a closer look. I can say at point-blank range when I'm talking about this. Shooting somebody. He shot him at point-blank range. That means he shot him at close range, close by, not far from the gun. Use the expression at point-blank range. Let's practice in the past. He shot him at point-blank range. I can also use passive voice and say he was shot, the victim. He was shot at point-blank range. So I can use active voice, the shooter, he. He shot him, the victim, at point-blank range. He shot him at point-blank range. Or I can use passive voice. He, the victim, he was shot at point-blank range. Let's hear some examples of the expression at point-blank range.
He shot her at point-blank range. That's not
Described as a credit to her force, she was shot at point-blank range and died instantly.
Police are investigating the murder of a Clay County deputy sheriff. While on a routine traffic stop, Deputy Danny Hernandez was shot at point-blank range by a gunman.
Let's practice. Did he shoot him at point-blank range? That's right, he shot him at point-blank range. You hear the pronunciation. He shot him, he shot him. The T in shot is between vowels, so it changes to a fast D. He shot him. I know what you're thinking. What about the H in him? That's not a vowel. But because the word him is not a stressed word, the H becomes silent. So the T is phonetically between vowels. So we hear shot him, shot him. He shot him at point-blank range. At point-blank range. The T in at is a stop T at point-blank range. The T in point is between consonants, so you don't really hear it. It's a stop T, but you don't really hear it. At point-blank range. He shot him at point-blank range. Let's practice with passive voice. Was he shot at point-blank range? That's right. He was shot at point-blank range. Now we can make it shorter. We can just say point-blank. He shot him point-blank. Or he was shot point-blank. Let's hear some examples of point-blank used in this way.
Point-blank, so she knew it was coming.
He shot him point-blank.
You gotta hit it point-blank, and you gotta hit it from behind.
Well, we're all fathers. You, me, the police officer, your brother shot point-blank.
Let's practice. Did he shoot him point-blank? That's right, he shot him point-blank. Let's practice with passive voice. Was he shot point-blank? That's right, he was shot point-blank. Now let's talk about a different meaning for the expression point-blank. Not at point-blank range, just point-blank. Example, they asked him a question. They asked him point-blank. Did you commit the crime? In this case, point-blank means directly. They asked him directly. They asked him getting to the point quickly. Not taking a long time to get to the point, to get to the question. They asked the question directly, with no pausing or waiting. They got to the point quickly. They asked him point-blank. Did you commit the crime? Or I can use reported speech. They asked him point-blank if he committed the crime. Let's hear some examples of people using point-blank in this way.
I asked him point-blank. I said, have you sent this to any other directors in Hollywood?
Ask him point-blank.
But look, when we get back, the next time we talk to him, I'll ask him point-blank. Who else have you brought this story to?
So example, they asked him point-blank, did you commit the crime? Or I can use reported speech and say, they asked him point-blank if he committed the crime. Pronunciation, if he committed the crime. He is not a stressed word, so sometimes you don't hear the H. You hear iffy, iffy. If he committed the crime. Committed the crime. The T in commit is between vowels, so it's a fast D. Committed, committed. The D at the end of committed is before a consonant, so it's a stop D. Stop the air. Committed the crime. Link to the next word, the. Committed the crime. They asked him point blank if he committed the crime. Let's practice. What did they ask him? That's right. They asked him point blank, did you commit the crime? Or I can use reported speech and say, they asked him point blank if he committed the crime. They went directly to the question. No waiting. That's point blank. So we see when we talk about shooting somebody, you will hear at point blank range or just point blank. And if you talk about asking someone a question directly, you'll hear point blank only. Examples, he shot him at point blank range. Or passive voice, he was shot at point blank range. Or I can just say point blank. He shot him point blank. And also with questions, they asked him point blank, did you commit the crime? Directly. Thank you for watching. And if you like this video, subscribe to our channel. And if you want to become a member, click the join button. And we'll see you next time.